Welcome, welcome, welcome back, my BHE, Be Health Empowered family, to another episode of Excuse Me, Doctor. My name is Dr. Melissa Clark. Of course, I love when you call me Dr. Mel. I am so delighted to be here in a incredibly new year. I hope it's kicking off with lots of energy, good health, good vibrations for everybody. And, we are just back here doing what we do all the time, which is bringing you the up-to-date health news, the facts, not the fiction, not the speculation, to help you make the best informed health decisions, get the most up-to-date health information that helps you, your family, and even your community. So thank you for tuning in and joining us once more on our different platforms, whether you're on blackdoctor.org, whether you're on Dr. Melissa Clark, whether you're on SiriusXM. We are just delighted to have you. And I want to make sure that you know we are here for you. So I want to make sure you know to put your questions in the chat. Anything that we touch on as we are going through all we have planned for you today, if it hits you the right way, go ahead and make a comment. If you got questions about it, go ahead and put that in the chat too, because we are going to get to you on a first come, first served basis. And I don't do this by myself. I have to have my crack co-hosts, and those are Mr. Wayne Bruce and Miss Bria Good. Come on in, y'all.
Hey. How are you,
Hey.
Dr. Mel?
How
you doing?
Fantastic.
Everybody talk at once. Everybody talk at once. Come on, everybody.
How y'all doing?
Doing good. I'm doing real good. I hope the crack co-hosts are a good type of crack, not the bad type of crack.
That was a good one. That's like me, man. Hold on, I can't see myself.
We can see you. You there.
But you can hear me. Everybody can hear me.
And your Washington Wizards hat. So we see
it is a Washington baseball team hat. The Nationals.
I'm sorry. I meant that. I meant Nats.
Or it could stand for Wagon or Wayne.
Or Wayne. Okay.
just who we are.
But anyway, it's a W, y'all. So fill in the blank. In other words.
It is a W. It is a W. So what's going on, Dr. Mel? It is a big time in sports.
Yes.
Because it's the playoffs.
Yes,
playoffs are here.
And we're talking about football.
We're talking about football.
Right. Yeah. So that's what we're talking about tonight on our show is, unless you have been hiding under a rock somewhere, everyone knows that there was a football player, Damar Hamlin, who basically died in the middle of a football game. And we're going to talk about what actually happened and what did they do to make him survive. Because also, if you've been keeping up with the news, he was released from the hospital today, miraculously. I know. Wow. And so how does all that, what is it that we need to take away from what happened in our day-to-day lives, right? So we're going to cover all that today. We have an incredible guest who's a sports medicine physician, an emergency medicine physician, Dr. Chris Conti, and he's going to help us walk through and break it down. So I hope everybody is ready for that incredible topic and that you're sharing it right now, even as we speak, with everybody you know, so that they can tune in and ask their questions too.
Share.
Please share, y'all.
Especially if you have young people who play sports, because that's really important for you as a parent to know what we're about to talk about. So
right. So let's get into it.
Yes, let's go ahead now. Yeah. All right. So every week, we talk about
New year, new hot topics. Sorry, Bria,
same diseases.
Right. We can't get away from
just a different day. Let's talk about this COVID, flu, RSV Dr. Mel, please tell me we got some type of good news with this. Like we need a new year, we need a little inspiration, a little
Come on
excitement,
now.
something.
Come on now. All right. Well, this is the good news. For flu and RSV, we are on the other side of the peak. We are no longer right. We are no longer going up with our cases. That triple demic that everybody was hearing about before Christmas. Thankfully, doesn't mean that flu and RSV aren't still out there. It just means that it's peaked and is now on a downward spiral. So that's great news.
That's good.
COVID, though, um, basically cases and hospitalizations are slightly up. And we have a new variant in town that's taken over called XBB. It's more easily spread, but the good news here is, again, it is not more fatal than what we've seen in the past. Deaths remain about 2,700 people a week, which is still 2,700 people too many. But that's way, 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 way down from where it was. So we're thankful for that. And then, there was some new news that COVID is not only associated with an increased risk of blood clotting when you first get it, but up to almost a year later, 49 weeks later, they're seeing still this increased risk for blood clots. And it's concerning, especially because the further out you go, we're seeing these blood clots in the legs that can break off and go to your lungs. And that we know is called a pulmonary embolus. And so it's really important, if you're in a high risk category for pulmonary embolus or for clotting problems at all, like you have underlying chronic disease and you've had COVID, talk to your doctor about what your potential risks are, whether you should be treating that in any particularly special way. Talk with your doctor if you fit into any of those categories. The one caveat I want to say is the research that showed that was done on the original COVID strain. So things may be a little bit better with the later variants, but it's still important news that you should talk with your doctor about.
Okay, I can take that. Good news and bad news. That's okay.
Yeah.
It seems like the bad gift that keeps giving.
Just keeps on giving.
Yeah.
Past Christmas, I need to stop, please.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we move into number 2 though. So
okay.
Everybody's on a diet. This is being taped beginning of the year, folks. If you don't know, it's the beginning of the year. Everybody's on the diet. Everybody's in the gym for the first 3 weeks of the year. And so everybody has a diet soda in their hand or some kind of diet something or something with a sweetener other than monk fruit. So what about artificial sweeteners? Thumbs up or thumbs down?
Down, no doubt. So there was a study in the British Medical Journal that was recently published, and it shows that there's a correlation with artificial sweeteners and an increased risk of heart disease, stroke, and certain kinds of cancer. And the irony of this is, just like you said, people think artificial sweeteners, oh, that's going to help me lose weight. And avoid diabetes or help keep my diabetes under control. But not only does it not help weight loss, some studies suggest that it might actually lead to weight gain by interfering with your metabolism.
Wow.
Wow.
Not good. Not good.
Yep. And so the artificial sweeteners that we're talking about, since you asked, are acetylsulfamine potassium, which is also called sweet one, aspartame, which we know as NutraSweet or Equal, saccharin, which we know as Sweet and Low, and sucralose, which we know as Splenda. And we know that sodas are like the number one culprit in terms of, diet soda specifically, where people consume most of artificial sweeteners, but there are over 23,000 products on the market that, even including ones that are labeled no sugar added, but they still taste sweet. Guess what? That's where your artificial sweeteners are coming in.
Wow. So we have one of the listeners in the chat says artificial sweeteners can increase your appetite.
Exactly. Right. And so that's they affect your metabolism. And so paradoxically, they can be leading to weight gain. And so one of the things that we should do to avoid them is really study our ingredient labels, which we should be doing anyway, to figure
Mhm.
out how much sodium and if they're additives and all that kind of stuff. Look to see whether there are artificial sweeteners in there. The other thing is switch out your sodas, whether they're regular or diet, switch it out for water or
Mhm.
some sort of naturally flavored beverage like a herbal tea or lemon flavored seltzer water, something. Um, if you have to sweeten your oatmeal, use fruit instead of artificial sweetener. Um, and then there are also two other sweeteners out there, one of which you mentioned, Wayne, monk fruit, and you know the other one, right? That aren't artificial, but can be substituted for sugar.
Agave?
No, that's straight
Oh
sugar.
no.
That's straight sugar?
It's straight sugar. No, I was thinking about stevia. So stevia and
Oh,
monk fruit are two real sweeteners, but they don't have the same calories as straight sugar
okay.
and can be used safely.
Yeah. Stevia and I don't get along. That's
Yeah, but
just
my new joint is monk fruit. I've been hitting
is
that
that
monk fruit. Yeah,
that is your new joint. And I
that's my
just
new
found
joint.
out that one of my favorite sweeteners of drinks is is a brand, and I just found out it's nothing but sucralose and as the first one you said.
Say, oh,
Flat bay, potassium.
acesulfamine potassium. Yeah,
There
that.
you go. That's just what I said.
Yeah. So time for a substitute.
Yeah.
Well,
So looks like monk
well,
fruit is up. What about date syrup? What about date syrup?
So, date syrup is still going to have the same calories as sugar.
Mhm.
Um, so, you can use it, but it's no different than cane. People forget that sugar pretty much comes from cane sugar. So
Mhm.
whether it's cane sugar, date sugar, um, agave sugar, or whatever, sugar,
Okay.
mhm.
All
and
right.
you can put that on
Well.
a T-shirt, sugar.
All right. All right.
Look,
All right.
y'all better make an agreement with Stevia, figure it out, cause it's either that or monk fruit.
There you
Um,
go.
well, let's move on to number 3, and let's talk about the new Alzheimer's drugs. I know they've been trying to work out a drug for a while now, but let's start from the beginning. Maybe everyone doesn't know what Alzheimer's is. Could you explain to us what it is and what is this new drug that they have out on the market?
Sure. Well, Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disorder. Over 6 million Americans have it. And what it does is it slowly destroys your memory and ability to think and even carry out simple tasks. And what they see in the brains of people with Alzheimer's is this buildup of this toxic protein called amyloid that
Mm.
kills brain cells and ultimately, again, affects your ability to think or to remember. Um, so there's no known cure for it. And so far, there are no medicines that really reliably slow the progression of it. But there's some hope on the horizon because there's this new FDA pre-approved drug called Leqembi, and it has been shown to slow the buildup of that toxic protein, amyloid beta. Um, and it also seems that it improves or it slows the worsening of memory, thinking, and functioning skills by 27% compared to placebo. Now, that's only in patients with early stage Alzheimer's. So that's really key.
So that means you actually see a difference for those people who are taking it, like that 27%. That's a difference in those people?
So that's the big question that everybody has. Is that 27%, does it really lead to an observable difference, right? Can you
Mhm.
see an improvement in your loved one? And so I think the jury is still out on that. They're still gathering data, still waiting for more data to come in on that.
Gotcha. And everything got side effects. When you see the commercials, they be like, it can cause diabetes, death. Like, so what's the side
Right.
effects of this one?
Foul
It's a
foul smelling stools, right?
Mhm.
So for this one, the common side effects are infusion-related reactions because it's a drug that's given IV every couple of weeks, and those are like flu-like symptoms, headache, nausea, changes in blood pressure. So that's one major group of side effects. But the other one is huge, and that is inflammation in the brain with little micro bleeds. And
Hmm.
so it's disqualifying a whole subset of people who might be eligible from taking it. And that's people who are already on blood thinners because they're concerned that that will lead to increased rates of bleeding. And I think there were 2 fatalities during the trials due to
Hmm.
that. Yeah. So, there's just going to be a narrow window of people who can take it, people with early stage Alzheimer's and people who are not on blood thinners. So more to come, but just wanted to give everybody a heads up that that is on the horizon.
Wow,
That's
that's
a very
good.
big side effect.
Yes, it
More,
is.
right. So look, Dr. Mel, a lot of people are getting their lab results before they have a chance to talk to the doctor. What do you think?
Yes, and we are familiar with that.
we
So,
are we are familiar with that one.
yeah. So this is the deal. So people are getting their lab results electronically now through their patient portals. And there was a law passed that says that people should get their results, test results immediately as soon as they're available, right?
Hmm.
And so patient advocacy groups think that that's great because it allows people to act on that information immediately and know that something is wrong. However, the flip side is doctors are not happy about it because it doesn't allow them to sit down with the patient and put things into context. What does this abnormal result mean? So that people aren't panicked or frustrated or not sure what to do. And
Mhm.
so it's for example, somebody getting a lab result back on a Friday night at 9 o'clock at night. Let's say their child has leukemia, and then they see that the results actually show the leukemia is working, is getting worse. Sorry, worsening. So those kinds of issues are what doctors are saying, hey, hold up, slow your roll. We really need to be able to sit down with our patients before they get the results back and put it into context. So I'm curious to know what our audience thinks about that because as I can kind of understand both sides. Would Do you want to know your lab results before you have a chance to sit down with your doctor?
Yeah, let's see what they think. Because I
Yeah.
got my lab results before I sat down with my doctor, and I was pretty upset.
You know, well, thank God you married to a doctor.
Kind of helps, but it was pretty
Yeah.
upsetting.
Yeah.
But let's see what everybody put it in the chat if you what you think about getting your lab results before your doctor. All right. Somebody
Yeah.
already said no, I want to wait.
Real
No,
quick
I want to
answer.
wait. I see you, Benita. She's like, no, I want to wait because I don't want to know what I don't want to know. I'm
Right.
good with that. I'm
That's
good with
I
fair.
that.
think I think I think there are a fair number of people out there that feel like that, but
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
so yeah, well, that's our weekly recap, y'all. Keep
Yeah.
putting your thoughts in the chat, but
Yeah.
we gonna move on.
To
The weekly debunk. Stopping misinformation in its tracks.
So the new year, the Twitter finger family does not let up in the new year. They just keep on coming every year. No New Year's resolutions to stop blowing up our phones, nothing like that. So we got a message from Tony Twitter fingers, and it says, "Y'all talk all that mess about eating healthy for the new year. I have a lot of mouths to feed. It's way too expensive. So excuse me, Dr. Mel, is that true? Are these things really that expensive that people can't afford to eat healthy?"
Well, Tony, I feel your pain. I hear you. And not only are some, those we know the healthy grocery store that really has expensive food, and even, in regular grocery stores, organic produce does seem to have a higher price tag. And sometimes finding healthy food in stores is a chore. I was at a large grocery store chain and in the hood, so to speak. We all know, how they're food deserts, and this one was a clear food desert. There was a few fruits and no vegetables to be found, and not even a frozen section because I don't know what happened. They cleared it all out. But anyway, here's some things you can do that will make healthy eating in the new year and for the rest of your life, much more affordable. It takes some planning, it takes a little bit extra time, but eating healthy on a budget is possible. So here's some things. Plan your meals and snacks around what's on sale. So buy the things that are on sale and come up with some recipes to use them. Make sure you have your frequent shopper account open, right? I did that with my niece the other day at the supermarket so that she could have her own discount. Shop seasonally, especially with your fruits and vegetables. Stick to the shopping list you create. And then when you bring it home, if you're buying non-organic produce, which is less expensive, soak it in a white wine vinegar solution. And we went over that on previous shows, all the different things solutions that you can use to clean off pesticides and off of your produce, so that you can go ahead and buy non-organic produce. And then your staples, like your brown rice, your dried beans and lentils, buy them in bulk, especially if they're on sale. You can use frozen alternatives. So I don't advocate canned as an alternative, because a lot of times canned foods have additives, but frozen fruits and frozen veggies are a reasonable alternative to their fresh counterparts. And then finally, make sure that you're checking your ingredient list. We talked about it before, to avoid items with added sugar and added salt. So that's one way that you can budget and still eat healthy, and try to keep those New Year's resolution. Did I just say that?
It's okay.
Keep your New Year's resolution on a
Yep.
budget.
There you go.
That's
And
good.
then-
Hopefully,
Yeah.
Tony.
Yep. And then if y'all have other ideas, ways that you budget and eat healthy, put those in the chat too. We want to hear from you.
We want to
Okay.
hear from you.
Don't be shy.
All right. See you,
All
Dr.
right.
Mel.
Thanks, y'all. We'll see you in a little bit, because we are going to move on to our main topic tonight, which is what happened to Damar Hamlin and why should you care? So for those who live their lives news free, like I said, Mr. Hamlin is a football player for the Buffalo Bills whose heart stopped right after he was tackled on last Monday night. He was successfully revived. He's doing better. He's getting ready to leave the hospital. But that's not a guaranteed outcome when something like that happens. And there were a lot of tense minutes and days where we didn't know which way it was going to go. So what happened? Why did he live? And what should you know if somebody collapses near you? So to answer those questions, we have Dr. Christopher Conti. He's an emergency medicine physician, a FIFA diplomat of football medicine. He's a former college athlete himself, soccer player, as well as a U.S. reservist who provided medical services in Afghanistan. I'm honored to have taught him emergency medicine at Howard University Hospital Emergency Medicine Residency Program, where he was one of our star residents. And he now practices and teaches other emergency medicine physicians, and provides community-based primary care services to underserved communities. Dr. Conti, thank you so much for joining us. Delighted that you're here.
It is awesome to be here. And I know everybody calls you Dr. Mel, but it's just like calling your mom by your first name. So it's hard for me to call you Dr. Mel, because I still remember you as Dr. Clark, one of my attendings. But it is absolutely fantastic to be here. I was taking a lot of notes on the other subjects before I joined the show, because there's so much good information that you were sharing already. I'm struggling now with people that I talk to in the community, the same question about what to do trying to eat healthy on a budget. So I'm gonna borrow some of that stuff, and I'm certainly gonna give you your props though when I share it.
Thank you. You are welcome, and tell them to tune into the show.
That's
there
right.
you go.
Absolutely.
So, I mentioned up front that you were a FIFA diplomat of football medicine. What does that do? What does that mean? And what do you do as it relates to sports medicine in that context?
So FIFA is the major organizing body for soccer, which is still, which everyone else in the world calls football, but we call soccer here in the United States. It's the most played and most watched sport on the planet. The World Cup, which is normally in the summer, just finished not so many weeks ago. And so FIFA is their organizing body. Within that organizing body, they have a medical consortium, which includes physicians, nurse practitioners, physiatrists, physical trainers, athletic trainers, etc., all trying to make the sport safer for everyone, not just the multi-million-dollar athletes that you see on television, but for the folks that, like I say, play in the beer league, back at the, in the rec leagues around the world. And so they developed a curriculum to help physicians better meet the needs of the health and wellness of soccer players at every level and at every skill level. And so having taken that training, you get that designation. It's not something that you go to school per se to do. I didn't go anywhere and sit in a classroom, but it was a series of trainings that I received to do
and
that.
you've been doing it for years, right? And you work mainly with youth athletes, right?
Right.
Up to age 17. Yep.
I work with our primarily high school aged student athletes, as well as elite level athletes up to age 17.
Great. Well, I wanted you to describe that because I want to let everybody know that you're an expert when it comes to sports medicine. And, we saw what unfolded last Monday night, January 2nd. We saw the tackle to Damar Hamlin. We saw the hit to the chest. We saw him stand up, sort of wobble a little bit, and then fall backwards. So what do you think was happening internally to him that led to his collapse?
Yeah. So, the heart is the main pump in the body. The blood comes in and then gets pumped out to the rest of the body. The brain is really stingy as it relates to oxygen. So it only takes a matter of seconds of decreased blood flow to the brain for the brain to shut down and you to lose consciousness. And so what we saw with Damar Hamlin was that something happened that interrupted the flow of blood from his heart to his brain. And if you look at your own body, your heart is about 18 inches away from your brain. So not a big, long distance. The biggest obstacle is gravity, but there are a lot of things that the body does physiologically to get that blood those 18 inches. Well, something happened to him after what looked like a relatively minor collision as it relates to football. We've seen lots of worse collisions all the time in football. But something happened that disrupted that blood flow and caused his heart to stop beating in a meaningful way to pump that blood to the heart, to the brain. And that's what we saw. So he was able to stand up. And at the time he stood up, the heart was still beating as it normally does. And then very quickly, very abruptly, something happened. We suspect in medicine that he sustained what's called ventricular fibrillation, which is just that heart rhythm that you hear about and watch on all the TV shows when they want to put the shock pads on you and shock the heart. The word fibrillate means to quiver. So the heart goes from beating in a nice rhythmical way to just kind of quivering there. And if you were looking at it even on an ultrasound, you would see the heart go from beating regular to all of a sudden it just looks like a jello quivering in a bowl. And when that happens, there's an immediate decrease in blood flow to the brain. And that's when we saw him fall backwards and fall to the ground.
Great explanation. A lot of people don't realize that the heart is powered by electricity, right? And it generates its own electrical pattern. And that is what then leads to the muscle contracting. So I know that there's some theories about what actually disrupted the electricity in his heart, which ultimately made his heart stop.
Right. So, I've heard over the last week or so, some individuals kind of attribute what happened to a heart attack. He did not sustain a heart attack. A heart attack is when you have decreased blood flow to the heart muscle itself as a result of a blood clot that stops and interrupts that blood flow. What Damar likely had happened was the heart is a mechanical pump, and every squeezing beat of the heart that you feel when you put your hand over your chest or when you feel one of the places where you feel your pulse is generated by an electrical signal. And he had a disruption in the electrical signal that was telling the heart to beat in a rhythmical way. The condition we think happened is called commotio cordis. And that word commotio just means to throw into disorder. So that's what happened. There was a blunt force trauma to the chest at a precise moment in time. So it's not just that he got hit in the chest, because players in every sport get hit in the chest all the time. He was hit in the right or the wrong place in the chest at the wrong time during the electrical signaling of the heart, and that caused the heart to stop beating rhythmically. And so, to put it in context, there are about 30 to 40 documented cases of this phenomenon per year in a world where there's 7 billion people. So this
Wow.
was a very, very, very rare event. I can't speak for you, Dr. Mel. See, I did it. I overcame the urge to call you Dr. Clark.
Very good. Very
I
good.
can't speak for Dr. Mel, but I know in 21 years of emergency medicine, I've never seen it.
Yeah.
And so it's very rare, but when it happens, it is extremely dramatic. And we
Yeah.
saw it before they cut away. We saw exactly what happened when the heart
Yeah.
stops beating abruptly.
Yeah. More rare than getting hit by lightning, for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
So we saw immediately that the trainers rushed onto the field. And what is it that they did right?
So it's interesting that when someone sustains a cardiac arrest or a stopping of the heartbeat due to an irregular heart rhythm, the survival rate is generally very, very low. But what we found in some of the data is that in mass gathering events, like sporting events, like concerts, where there are already pre-positioned emergency personnel and trained people, the survival rates are higher. And so what happened with Damar was he immediately collapsed, and it was such an abnormal type of collapse that the referee, his teammates, the opponents, everyone that was in his vicinity knew that this was not an ordinary, he got a ding and he'll get back up. And so, if you watch now in the NFL, there are multiple cameras that are watching the action that we don't even see. There's a health team in the booth that's watching, and they are in constant contact with the trainer. And so I don't know if they got a signal from the booth or whether the trainer was just in tune and astute, but they knew immediately. And so, the response was 10 seconds. Within
Wow.
10 seconds of the collapse, they were on the field doing what we in emergency medicine call their primary survey or their primary assessment. They immediately determined that he was unconscious, he was not breathing, and he did not have a heartbeat or a pulse. And they immediately began CPR or cardiopulmonary resuscitation, where they begin to compress the chest to try to get the blood that's still in the body circulating, because now the heart can't do it. And then the second thing that they did was, especially in teens and adults, the most common reason for these sudden cardiac events is due to an irregular heart rhythm. That rhythm we talked about, ventricular fibrillation. And the most effective way to treat it is to shock the heart with what's called a defibrillator. And so the second thing was that the next person on the scene after the trainer was the person who came onto the field with the defibrillator, which they could attach to the chest, determine that the rhythm was one that was irregular and could be changed with a shock. And they administered the automated external defibrillator, or the AED. So when those two things happen in a matter of under 30 seconds, it significantly improved Damar's chances for a successful survival, or what we call resuscitation. So, all of those things happened in a really, really short amount of time, and that absolutely made a difference in this case.
So you mentioned CPR, and you mentioned that people who are at these sporting events or mass events and have a cardiac event or a heart event like Damar did have a higher rate of survival. Because trained personnel are around. How does one go about getting trained in CPR?
And that's a really good question. There are lots of ways to get trained now. There are courses that you can take through the American Red Cross, through the American Heart Association. Even churches are sponsoring events. Boys and Girls Clubs are sponsoring events. And essentially, there's a classroom component where you're kind of sitting and learning some of the things about how the heart beats and why it's important to restore blood flow. And then there's a practical part where you're actually learning how to effectively do chest compressions, knowing what the landmarks are on the body to do the compressions. And then you also learn about what we used to call rescue breathing, or mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, or blowing into a non-breathing patients to give them life-sustaining oxygen. But now
I know with COVID, there's a concern about that mouth to mouth. So are chest compressions effective without the mouth to mouth part?
Yes. So the evidence in the research seems to consistently show that what we now call compression only CPR is an effective way of circulating oxygen rich blood to the rest of the body, because that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to continue to deliver oxygen to the body, because the heart can't do it until all of the personnel and resources arrive that allow you to determine if the heart can be shocked back into a normal rhythm. And so compression only CPR is better than no CPR. And in a lot of studies that suggest that compression only CPR is equivalent to full resuscitation with both chest compressions and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So again, if you're hesitant because of you don't want to put your mouth on someone, whether it's a stranger or a loved one, learn chest compression only CPR, and you can certainly make a difference.
So if somebody collapses near you and you're afraid of doing mouth to mouth, that's not a reason to not go learn CPR, so you know what to do when people collapse. In other words.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you, in your emergency medicine experience, we've both seen those cases where the patient makes it to the emergency department, and one of the questions we always ask is, how long have they been down? How long have they been without a pulse and without anyone doing chest compressions? The outcomes that we do see that are good are typically the ones that are associated with witnessed cardiac arrest events where CPR was started into a family member, a friend, a loved one, people calling 911 and not being able to offer any kind of effort to resuscitate that patient until the ambulance arrives.
Right. And so I think, what I'm expecting is going to happen as a result of, this happening in prime time on a Monday night and getting so much press coverage, is that more people will go out and get certified in CPR, because like you said, it does and can make a difference in terms of saving lives.
Absolutely.
So, you mentioned though that this is super rare, that this kind of injury in a sporting event is rare. Obviously, it's much more common in everyday life. People with underlying heart disease collapse and have ventricular fibrillation. But in the context of sporting event, um, should parents and athletes be worried about this? And are there other kinds of injuries that are actually much more common that haven't been getting a lot of
Absolutely.
publicity?
And certainly this event raised some awareness, which is a good thing. But the likelihood of even the people who watch this event seeing it again in their lifetime is very, very low. But the reality is that for school-age children, for example, ages kindergarten through 12th grade, both in sports and outside of sports, the most common cause of sudden death in the school building on school property is sudden cardiac arrest. So before active shooters and overdoses and car accidents and bus events, the most common cause of death in school is sudden cardiac arrest, which is why you see you've seen this movement in school spaces, at least in the school side of things, not necessarily the sports side, of training teachers and custodians and school administrators. And you see AEDs, automatic external defibrillators, in many places in school buildings. And so, what parents need to understand, one, is that because sudden cardiac arrest is still the most common reason why a child is going to die on the field, on the court, skating on the ice, playing baseball, One, they need to make sure that they don't just consider that pre-participation physical just to be a one-page piece of paper that they take to the urgent care just to get a signature on. They need someone to do the physical exam, to listen to their child's heart, to ask those questions about, have you ever had fainting events with exertion? Have you ever had periods of unusual dizziness or shortness of breath when you were participating in physical activity? Are they unusual? I mean, when a physician is looking at a patient and actually paying attention, you may notice that this child has certain features that may predispose them to certain cardiac events. Are they unusually tall? Do they have unusual flexibility in certain joints? Those all are clues to an astute physician to say, we need to examine and look a little further. Does the person have a heart murmur and a regular sound in their heart rhythm? And anyone who has a heart murmur, even if it's been called in the past an innocent murmur, if they're going to be participating in high intensity sport, they need a more intense, more thorough evaluation. And now in the face of COVID, we know that particularly in the young, with these inflammatory heart diseases, which also predispose you to being more vulnerable to irregular heart rhythm, that COVID question needs to be asked as well. Has your child had COVID? Whether they had mild, moderate, or severe symptoms when they had COVID, and have they had any symptoms, particularly as it relates to shortness of breath or chest pain or palpitations after having had COVID.
Right.
So again, so that's one
really
thing.
I just want to stop and highlight that, because the whole thing about long COVID and myocarditis, or the inflammation in the heart, pericarditis, the inflammation in the heart sac, as a result of COVID, or even several weeks after COVID, is a real thing. And including that and making sure that you as a parent tell your doctor that history about your child is really important. So thank you for highlighting that.
Absolutely. And then I think the other thing that parents can do to become more empowered from a health standpoint, because there are a lot of parents, and I'll admit that I've been one of those parents, that take that level of empowerment as it relates to sideline coaching and yelling at coaches and texting them during the game and all the things that so-called empowered parents do to quote unquote help their child on the field. But we can take that same level of energy and enthusiasm and empowerment and take it to the organized sports leagues where our children are playing, and ask about things like, if it's a central venue, like every baseball game is played at the same field, can we invest as a club in an automated external defibrillator? Can we invite the American Red Cross in before the season starts and offer CPR training for our umpires and referees and a parent or child that want to get trained? And then at the school level, asking the tough questions of your school board. I know we have defibrillators in the buildings, but do our athletic trainers travel to games with defibrillators? In fact, are the trainers themselves trained in CPR? We were talking offline before the broadcast, and right now in 2023, there are 17 states in the United States that don't require coaches to have CPR training for middle and high school athletes. Now, a school district within those states may require it individually, but the fact that schools don't require it, yet schools will require that you have to, if you get a concussion, you have to be seen not just by any doctor, you have to be seen by someone with training in concussion.
A concussion specialist, right?
And you make people sign all kinds of scary releases before you let the child play. But to think that you don't require the people who are spending to be honest, many during the season in school, the coaches and the athletic trainers are spending more time with our children than the parents
are. Teachers.
And the teachers are.
Teachers, yeah.
So that's a tough question that parents can ask of the school board. And, if they're not pleased with the answer, then they can facilitate trying to get that to change.
Yeah, you brought some excellent points out, and I can't believe that it's already time for us to go to the audience to see if they have any questions. So Bria and Wayne, Please come on back in. What is the word on the street, so to speak? What are people saying in the chat, either about this topic or any of the other topics that we mentioned earlier in the broadcast?
Well, from what I see, people are definitely on board with everybody getting CPR. Everybody needs to be CPR trained. I mean, also, if you CPR, and like Yvonne says, we have a faithful listener, Yvonne Smith. She says, also people need to get recertified every year at CPR. How about that? So, my question, I have a question, and before I go to any, it's kind of personal privilege here before I go anywhere else, is how much does the AED machine cost, and how expensive is it?
That's a really good question. They're several $100s or more. And then every several years you have to then replace the battery. And the batteries are, expensive as well. So it would be challenging for a lot of community-based programs without some grant support, or without increasing the cost for participants or for parents to pay for participation, to afford a lot of these devices. But I do think that with what's happened now, because again, it happened, in the second most watched sport in the world, which is football, on Monday night. And so I think that level of raised awareness is going to change the landscape a lot. And you're going to find that, one, the cost of these devices is going to go down, and the demand for training, both in CPR and AED use, is going to go up. And so, and you mentioned the fact that more people, someone in the chat said that more people need to be trained. Well, I remember back when Dr. Clark was our attending physician, when we started medical or residency, that even with advanced cardiac life support, it was believed that it should just be reserved for the doctors in the hospital. But we then realized really quickly that nurses and physical therapists and all of these other individual professionals who are really spending more time one-on-one with the patients, they needed to be trained too, because we're trying to extend what we call the chain of survival. And so I totally agree with the person in the chat that the more people we can train, the better. We encourage parents to ask their babysitters if the babysitters are trained, and if they're not, to maybe foot the bill to train your ride or die babysitter, to make sure that they're properly equipped. So while they, heaven forbid, if there's an emergency, while they're waiting for 911 to respond, that they can do something to help extend the survival chances for your child.
And as our seniors age, also thinking about caregiving on the other end of the spectrum, of course, people that you get off of care.com and other services like that, you also want to make sure that they too are trained in CPR as well. What else do we have out there in the chat, or any other co-host privilege that y'all gonna say?
Well, first, I definitely want to say thank you for talking about it amongst younger individuals as well, because we always think we're invincible, right? We think we are like the healthiest we can be, but for Damar to be like 24, around that age, or I can't remember exactly his age, I think it was around 24, you would think like, oh wow, like he's healthy, he's young, you don't ever think something like that would actually happen. So I'm really glad that you were able to talk about that. And what was the condition that you said that he had?
Well, so we don't know. We know that he had a sudden irregular heart rhythm, and we suspect, since there's no known history of any underlying heart disease, that he suffered from commotio cordis, which is COMMOTIO, and that's a Latin word that means to throw into disorder, and then cordis, CORDIS, which is just heart. So it's to throw the heart into disorder, and that's exactly what happened. And again, you saw that, there were more forceful collisions before that one, and every football game you watch, there are collisions that are far more violent than the one that caused this event. It was just the wrong part of the chest at the wrong part in the heart cycle where the electrical activity was vulnerable. And, you know, it's so rare, but when it happens, that's exactly what it happens and how it happens. And within that 30 to 40 cases, it's even more rare for it to be the result of blunt trauma from something other than what we call projectile sports. So usually it's a baseball or a lacrosse ball or something striking almost like a musket ball,
Right.
striking a really small area on the left side of the chest at just the right moment. But in this case, we saw it was really an innocuous looking hit. And it did what it did.
And I want to distinguish between what Dr. Conti said, that, you know, this was due to trauma, versus what he also said too, which is that one of the number one reason why young people die in school or during sports is due to heart issues. And that typically means there was some underlying heart problem that, when you combined it with the exertion, led to heart problem, right? Where the heart stopping. And so what he's saying is Damar Hamlin, we don't know that he had any underlying issues. So that's why the assumption is that it was due to the blow to the chest.
Okay, we have another question coming in from Ellen Claire Lamb. She says, Damar Hamlin's recovery has been so amazing and rapid. What will doctors be watching for as that recovery continues?
Well,
Excellent
that's an excellent question. So, you know, if we go from head to toe, we know that there was an interruption in blood flow when the heart stopped beating. And you know, CPR is a life-sustaining substitute for the beating heart, but it is not the same. So he had CPR for, by all accounts, at least 9 minutes. So he was without a pulse for at least 9 minutes. So they were going to be looking at his neurological function. They're going to be looking at all of the elements of brain function, not just can you wiggle your toes and wiggle your hands and fingers, but they're going to be doing a battery of tests on memory and processing and thought. They're going to assess his mood and all of the parts of all of the things that the brain controls, because the brain is undoubtedly affected when the body doesn't have oxygen flowing when the heart is beating. They're going to be looking at his heart function. I'm sure they already have. They're going to be doing a whole battery of tests. They're going to do an ultrasound of the heart called an echocardiogram, and I'm sure they'll do more than one. He'll probably have a stress test, and where they put him on a treadmill and they watch the heart both electrically and mechanically. He'll do a battery of lung tests. They'll look at his muscles and his reflexes, and so they'll be doing a battery of tests. And this is whether he was a high performing professional athlete or not. This will all be part of the rehab process. And then, you know, prayerfully, if he does decide he wants to try to come back and play football again, then the level of testing will be even greater. You know, contrast this event to what happened about a year and a half earlier in the European Championships with one of the best soccer players in the world, Christian Eriksen, who had a cardiac arrest on television for all the world to see. And he was found to have an underlying irregular heart rhythm that he didn't know he had, and now is playing high-level professional soccer, was in the World Cup, and now plays for one of the best European soccer teams in the world with a pacemaker in his chest.
Wow.
So, you know, one of the other things that Damar has in his favor was, prior to this event, he was an extremely fit, elite-trained professional athlete. And so that will also make it more likely for him to have a faster and more complete recovery, whether he decides to play football again or not.
Wow, great question. What else do we have out there?
So, talking about famous players who suffer from cardiac arrest, we had a comment from Yvonne Smith that said, remember when Lynn Bias had cardiac failure at Maryland basketball? The Maryland basketball star that had cardiac arrest. And Wayne, I remember you were also very good friends with Lynn Bias. So just highlighting the fact that this is common amongst players.
So
and that,
Lynn, if I could go in, because I don't know if the doctor is old enough.
I know. I grew up in DC.
Okay.
I remember
Okay.
Len Bias very well.
Yeah.
Don't let his youthful appearance fool you.
Youthful
right?
appearance. There he has it. There he has
Right.
it.
I knew.
So he was my classmate. But it was different circumstances with Lynn Bias for our viewer. Different circumstances, and his was induced unfortunately by cocaine. And but I do want to share this briefly because we have a couple other questions. Lynn Bias was probably the most fit athlete I have ever seen in my life at that period in my life. And being friends with him and seeing him after he worked out or something, I used to run in the gym. We had a gym called Cole Fieldhouse. I used to run. You might not can tell now, but seeing him come out, I actually looked at him before he left school and looked at him and said, "My God, I don't know, like, how'd you come from the skinny freshman to this African godlike physique?" And he was a great person, and just unfortunate turn took his heart out.
And it does raise the issue, which is for a topic that you may discuss at another time, is the fact that one of the things that we are seeing in middle and high school athletes is one, self-medication for various reasons with marijuana, for example. But the big one is nicotine and vaping. High dose nicotine is being consistently shown to have some really bad impacts on the heart in particular and the lungs. And so, with Len Bias, with others who are, utilizing other chemical substances, remember, every mechanical beat of the heart is driven by an electrical signal, and every electrical signal that generates the beat is determined by the movement of chemicals. And so if you are chemically altering the internal chemistry of your body, you are putting your heart at risk, even if you are extremely fit and have no underlying heart problems. So for all those young athletes out there who think that vaping is okay, one, it's going to be a banned substance very soon, because we do know it is a performance enhancer. And two, it has long-term and short-term effects on the heart and the lungs in particular.
All right.
Wow. Well, that is an excellent cautionary note to end on. We covered a lot, Dr. Conti, and I just want to thank you, for giving us that incredible rundown of everything around Damar Hamlin, CPR, how the heart works, and especially the concerns and cautions that you just mentioned regarding vaping. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, of course, Brianne Wayne, for bringing us the questions from the audience. And of course, my Be Health Empowered family, incredible as always, with your questions and comments in the chat. Look, I got to tell you this. This is really important. I hope everybody is listening. This is one of your last chances to sign up for the COVID resilience study that's happening at Howard University. Remember, it is just 2 surveys that you need to fill out, and you can be reimbursed $100. What a great way to start off the new year. It's entirely voluntary because it's a study, but you have this opportunity to not only contribute to science just by filling out these surveys, but also to be reimbursed $100. And if you're interested at all, just email Dana Harvey, and the email is danaharveyresearch@gmail.com. That's Dana, D-A-N-A, Harvey, H-A-R-V-E-Y, research@gmail.com. Well, that's it for us today, y'all. So happy that you tuned in. And until we meet again, and until we talk again, until you put your questions in the chat one more time, remember, be wise, be well, and be health empowered. Thanks for joining.
So I guess I should thank the Robinsons. They invited me. They still don't know. I hooked up with Dave 3 days ago. He'll start coughing tomorrow. And I bet in 10 days he'll be on a ventilator. Now his wife, she's not vaccinated because she thinks it'll prevent her from being pregnant. But what they don't know is that I can decrease sperm count. Sorry, Dave. Good luck with that.